Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. My name is Martin Warwick. We are in Amsterdam in the Netherlands at the RAI Exhibition Centre where Broadband World Forum 2014 is taking place, and I'm talking with an old friend, Justin Dessade of Huawei. Justin, good to see you again. We meet again.
It's a pleasure to be back here.
Thank you. It's noisy because we're in an event. There are people shouting all over the place like fairground barkers,
Sure.
but so people who are watching this will understand that we're in a live environment.
It is live.
But we shall carry on through it.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, the last time we talked, Justin, we talked about SDN, the importance of the new technology,
Right.
and the fact that you had some use cases out there, half a dozen or so at the time. Time moves very, very rapidly. The industry moves very quickly. So, let's recap for a second and then go forward. The cloud is the enabler for SDN and NFV. SDN and NFV, software-defined networks and network functions virtualization, are also enablers for service providers to provide new services and applications. So one is layered upon the other.
Right.
So that's where we're starting from. Now, how do you think SDN and NFV, but I know you focus mainly on SDN, how do you think SDN is going to help service providers, telcos and operators to serve their customers better and so become more competitive?
If we take a broader look at the whole picture, what has been happening in the industry, really, we are now well into a new digital age, where every business has been transforming itself into a digital business. And this continues to have profound impacts on service providers' infrastructure, operations, and services, but also gives rise to a broader range of new challenges and new entrants into the ICT ecosystem. And NFV and SDN have been major drivers of that transformation. And as you mentioned, last year or the year before, we had a handful of successful use cases. But I can tell you that since last year, there has been a huge progress, both in the number of use cases, but also the real world aspect and deployment of these use cases almost at every domain in the network end to end, starting from the fixed broadband access, mobile broadband, the metro mobile backhaul at the edge of the network, and the IP core and data center interconnect, and of course within the data center. So I'm happy to announce that as of today, we have over 60 real projects, collaboration projects with more than 20 operators around the world, including 8 commercial deployments of SDN and NFV projects and use
So
cases.
you're actually out there commercially already?
Yes, it is happening, it is real, and it is here to stay. It is here for good.
What you know about that, I'm not asking you for any state secrets or anything, but what you know of those, what impact has SDN and NFV had on those operators?
It's interesting because we have seen a shift in terms of the questions that operators have been asking themselves and have been asking us to help with those questions. So 2-3 years ago, they were asking us, show me that SDN works. Then later, show me that NFV can bring value, can help me save money, can help me with the unit cost of my network. Increasingly, those questions shifted toward, show me how it can help with my top line. Show me how they can really help me monetize my network in new ways not previously possible. As you know, operators continue to invest heavily in the infrastructure, and as mobility, cloud, and video continue to drive these new trends and these new transformations, operators have to find new ways to monetize their networks in a more efficient way. The current TCO structure is not only inefficient, it's just not sustainable anymore.
Okay, fine. Now, that's the background to it. Let's talk about the migration path itself, because this is a difficult process, isn't it? Or it can be a difficult process. How do we get there? That's the question. And remember, and I'm remembering what we talked about before, the importance in all of this of openness and of open standards and so on. Now, you're working with the Open Network Foundation.
Correct.
How does that facilitate Huawei's position in SDN?
Great question. So our belief is that as part of this new transformation, we really have to help service providers break free from the old paradigm of closed proprietary systems. Operators want to embrace the software movement. They want to be able to leverage the latest innovations and technologies from the cloud, from the web, from the IT world, and they are asking us to build open systems where, ideally speaking, the operator can choose the best of the breed components from different vendors, and these components would interwork smoothly using open standards-based interfaces, and that is why we are focusing on driving this work within the Open Networking Foundation that has been really pioneering this effort since the early days of SDN. And it is very important that every component that vendors build is based on open technologies, based on some sort of an open standards, and my advice to service providers is to push the vendors to build such open ecosystems and make sure that we will not kind of use this transformation towards software as a new way of doing business using the old kind of methods, I would say.
What, Justin, challenges remain, do you think, and have the opportunities yet been fully realized?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, operators are now asking us to help them migrating their services and infrastructures from the traditional legacy environments where they have made huge investments onto this new paradigm, this new architecture.
Yeah.
So they are all strong believers that SDN and NFV are here to stay. Now the next step is to actually go through that transition. And this is not something that any operator or any vendor, in my opinion, should do alone, because this is a long haul effort, just like every major network transformation. And I'm honored to be driving some of that effort within the Open Networking Foundation as the chair of the migration working group that is really chartered with defining and making recommendations on the right methodologies, the right tools, and the right metrics that need to be used as part of this migration process. And we have collected a number of real-world use cases. So we have tried to gather as much information as possible on the lessons learned and the methodologies used for those migration use cases. We have produced documents that are now public. Everybody can take a look at them and can hopefully learn from them. And we are continuing that work with kind of next level of details in terms of the metrics and the tools that are needed for every stage of the migration. For example, how do you prepare your starting network or your traditional network for the task of migration? How do you bring it to a stable state that can be then moved to the next kind of SDN state?
Yep.
How do you define the procedures and the very detailed steps of the migration kind of phase with rollback mechanisms in place, so if something goes wrong, you can come back to the working state? And once the migration is done, what tools and what metrics do you use to make sure that your SDN migration has been successful, that you are still offering services at the same SLA levels as promised to your customers, and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting work. I invite you to take a look at it.
I will indeed do that. Now, I mentioned remaining challenges because I want your opinion on this.
Of course.
You know and I know that throughout the years how networks have changed and and so we're talking here in the context of SDN and NFV, but specifically of SDN. Every time a new network element is introduced or changes as a transformation, it's usually for a reason, okay, to do with throughput, to do with bottlenecks, to do with pain points within the network. SDN addresses a lot of that, but it strikes me that the next pain point, or the one that now is the most evident, the biggest bottleneck now, is the back office functions of OSS and BSS, which have been the Cinderella of the industry for a long time, always in the cobwebs at the back there, but they've been pulled forward into the daylight in recent years, and there's a lot of focus on them, and it's a vital part of what's going on. But do you think it's being addressed properly yet, or is it the last thing that's going to happen?
I'm hoping that it is not the last thing that will happen in this movement, because as you mentioned, OSS and BSS have been a major source of pain and issues for major operators around the world. I myself have an operator background and have been involved in some of those transformation efforts, and I can tell you that some OSS and BSS platforms are not optimal. That's an understatement. So as part of this movement, really there is a great opportunity to move a lot of those OSS and BSS functions into software. And the same thing that is happening with the control plane, that means, or other layer 4, layer 7 functions, how can you offer these network applications as software on top of a shared pool of hardware resources, could be commodity hardware or other type of hardware. The same architectural mindset can be applied to OSS and BSS. Now there is a great set of technologies available in big data and kind of a unified compute, storage, and a networking platforms bundled together. We are, as part of Huawei's kind of SDN and NFV commercial efforts, we are building a new architecture for these OSS and BSS platforms that does take advantage of a unified set of resources, both for networking, compute, and storage, with a cloud OS that can bundle all these disparate sources of hardware and infrastructure together, supporting the OpenStack architecture, and helping operators actually open up these OSS and BSS applications to even third-party application developers. So the architecture is a little bit more detailed than what I'm describing, but it's a multi-layer, completely open architecture where you have OpenStack support, you have OSS suite, you have an BSS suite, you have a large number of open source big data technologies, and all of these will hopefully create a much more agile OSS, BSS, and IT infrastructure for operators. As I mentioned, not only the current TCO structures are not sustainable, but also operators in this day and age of OTT service providers and all sorts of web applications, they will not be able to compete with web service providers given their current OSS and BSS platforms.
Next year, this event will be held not in Amsterdam, but in London's Docklands. If we meet again there, and let's hope we do, we're fitting well enough to do it, what changes do you envisage there will be 12 months down the line? Because things are moving so very quickly at the moment.
Great question. I'm hoping and predicting that SDN and NFV will be able to address a broader set of issues and challenges for operators. So we talked about mobility. There's a great number of use cases around mobile broadband, mobile backhaul, and the whole mobility space. We talked about video. There are great use cases that help address the video bandwidth and distribution in the network. And of course we talked about cloud, the fact that all data and applications are moving to the cloud. How do we make sure that we build the right data center-centric networks to move all this traffic around and to move the applications where they're most needed closer to users. So these are all interesting use cases. But we also see an emergence of other types of technologies such as Internet of Things and machine-to-machine communications that will yet again place a new set of requirements and challenges on the infrastructure. All these different applications, whether it's Internet of Things, whether it's mobility, whether it's video or traditional kind of web applications, have a different range of requirements, whether it's latency, whether it's bandwidth, whether it's the real-time nature of communication with the server's back end. So Internet of Things, for example, can offer a range of new applications. We don't know what those applications will be next year or 2 years from now. They can cover a number of verticals: transportation, energy management, healthcare, logistics. All these types of verticals will give rise to a broader set of applications with very different range of requirements, as I mentioned. So.
Well, certainly it never stops, does it?
Exactly, it never does.
Well, we can't get off the roundabout now we're on it. It's going too quickly. So, Justin Dezade, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you again.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you again. Thank you so much.